Where did dayparting come from? Dayparting, that is where certain songs in your playlist are played only at a certain time of the day, only in a certain part of the day, thus dayparting. It was a defensive move. One of the first things top 40 program directors learned when they were in competition with another top 40 station in town, they learned that the main reason people tuned away from their station was a song I don't like. A little background here. The idea of top 40 radio, which was the first format, the idea all music all the time, the idea was to play nothing but the top 40 hits in America at that given time. And a lot of those records in the 1950s, cruising into the 1960s, were playing nothing but 40 records. That was it. There were no rock and roll oldies, remember. I mean, when rock and roll was only 3 or 4 years old. That was a recurrent, although we didn't have that name, recurrent, at the time. And playing nothing but the 40 records that were doing the most selling. There were a lot of what we call adult records in the mix. Same time, the Beatles and the Stones and Dusty Springfield and all of those great Motown artists were on the charts. So was Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and a lot of instrumental hits. The Beatles hit number one in January of '64 and held the number one position with various songs all the way until April, I believe. The song that knocked the Beatles out of number one for 1 week only was Hello Dolly by Louis Armstrong, a song from a Broadway play, for gosh sakes. Now, we knew as music directors and program directors, some of our audience really didn't care that much for Hello Dolly, those being kids on the younger side, which was the principal audience that you were going for because the kids who controlled the radio in the car? The kids controlled the radio in the car. And their mothers and fathers found they liked a lot of what was in top 40 also. But the thing is, there was a lot of polarization. The other side was what the adults who were in the audience didn't like, and they were pretty vocal about it. Now, Top 40 could play, in addition to all of those rock and roll songs, some Johnny Cash. Country singer and songwriter Roger Miller was having a lot of hits in the early and middle 60s. They were very popular with a percentage of the audience, particularly in the American South. They liked Johnny Cash and some of those country songs. Smart program directors recognized that a good percentage of the listenership didn't like country at all. And then there was the R&B side. There was a significant percentage of adults who still thought it was race music, which was what it was called in the 30s, 40s, and into the early 50s. R&B, rhythm and blues, was called race music at the time. And there were a lot of white people that thought rock and roll was the devil's music. A few black adults kind of thought that too, from what I've heard from some of my friends. Radio program directors, if you were in competition, if you had another top 40 radio station going against you in your market, you had to deal with those attitudes, particularly since advertisers, and read that as principally white businessmen, advertisers were some of the ones that were objecting to some of the songs that were on the radio stations. If the furniture dealer, who always ran a big schedule, said to the ad salesman, and I did hear this from the ad salesman, why is your station playing so much of that nigger music? Okay, the comment gets back to the station manager, back to the program director immediately, and they got to think about it. That guy spends a lot of money with the radio station. He buys enough advertising to pay 2 of our full-time announcers every month. The white furniture store owner thought Papa's Got a Brand New Bag by James Brown would lead white children to hell. Problem was his daughter was crazy about the song, and her boyfriend was crazy about the song. White kids were buying James Brown records in huge numbers. So what to do? If you were a pop music radio, if you were a top 40 radio station, you needed to play Everybody Loves Somebody by Dean Martin in 1964. It was a monstrously big hit record. Adults loved that record. And so did a lot of kids, particularly young females. But boys who were into the Animals and the Stones thought it was a piece of, Dayparting was the solution. We knew that adults turned on television now when they got home. They didn't turn on the radio. The people that were listening to the radio at night were the younger listeners. During the daytime, the younger listeners were, a large portion of them, were at school. So during the daytime, you played Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Louis Armstrong, and at night, you played James Brown and Wilson Pickett. And you played songs by the Four Seasons and Dusty Springfield and the Beatles and Jerry and the Pacemakers. You played those daytime and nighttime because everybody loved those songs. I don't know that dayparting has much application anymore. The landscape has so changed, so dramatically changed from what it was before. How people use the radio has changed. A radio station has to be very consistent with its music mix. It can't sound like one kind of station at one time of the day and another kind of station another time of the day. And those are my thoughts on the subject at this moment for your consideration. Talk to you later.